Okie doke. Well, yeah, it's good to be here all together from all our different living rooms, lounges, kitchens, wherever we are, to be here together. I think some people were in the garden last week. It's not so warm today, but hopefully warmer by a little bit later. I want to start by reading the Bible passage. It's only a short passage, but you might value having it in front of you. If you've got your Bibles, why don't you turn to Matthew chapter 11. So we're going to be going Matthew chapter 11, and today and next week actually want to look a little bit at the concept of stop. Sorry, I did it the way around. Stop, rest, and then reset. So stop, rest, and reset. And as I said, it's going to be in two kind of part A, part B. We'll see how far we get together today. I want to be able to get us out into breakout rooms, and so we will be doing that a little bit later to talk about some of what you've heard today and how you respond to it, how you reflect on it. But that's what we're going to be looking at. The importance of stop, the importance of rest, the importance of a reset. And if you've been watching some of the videos that we've shared already, the ones that I've done, or some of the stuff that's coming out of the Love Black Country, you might hear some familiar tones to some of this, because it's certainly really been impacting me, what the Lord's wanting to say at this time. I've also borrowed a little bit again from our friends at the Bible Project, and so this video I found really useful. I'm going to post it in the chat for you all. If you want it, then you have to copy and paste it and post it. I began to listen to some of the podcasts on the idea of Sabbath, and that's what we're going to start at looking at today, and the importance of Sabbath. And I started listening to these podcasts, and they said that they were into their like 40th page of notes, and I thought, I'm just going to watch the video. It's cheating really, because the podcasts lead to it, but it's such a good video that I thought I'd share it with you here today. So Sabbath, yeah, I want to talk about Sabbath. But before we get to that, let's read this Bible passage, shall we? So Matthew 11, and we're going to be reading just a few short verses. I'm going to start at verse 27, which picks up, these are the words of Jesus, these are, and Jesus is addressing the people. He's been challenged by religious leaders. He's got quite upset with some cities. And then we pick up on verse 27, the following words. He says this: all things, so all things, not just some things, all things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burdens are light. Let me pray before we carry on. Jesus, we thank you for your words. We thank you for this short passage that we're going to look at today. And Lord, as we reflect on it a bit, as we talk a bit about this idea of stop, rest and reset, Lord, would you speak into our hearts? Would you challenge our thinking where it needs challenging? Would you bring compassion and love to us where we need that today? Lord, we want you, we need you, and we're open to hearing from you today. Amen. So, for those of you who like a good Hebrew word, the word Sabbath comes from the word Shabbat. S-H-A-B-A-T, Shabbat. Now, often we think of a Sabbath as the seventh day, a seventh day of rest. And we'll get to that. But actually, the word Sabbath, from this word Shabbat, simply means stop. Just stop. Cease from all work. It doesn't actually mean rest, and we will get to rest in a bit, but it means stop. So why is it important that we stop? Why does God say to us to stop? Why do we have a day of rest? Why do we do that? Well, it's not just because if we carried on working continuously, we would be exhausted, even though that's partly to do with it. It's not because if we carry on working continuously, we will end up literally having a breakdown. It's not just that, even though that's definitely a reason to stop, isn't it? I want to say there's two reasons why we should stop, why we should Sabbath. Firstly, God did it himself. When we look at the creation story, and you know I love that kind of creation narrative in Genesis 1, 2 and 3, we see God creating the universe in 6 days. He literally, out of the wasteland, in some way it's described, out of the nothingness, other people describe it as God created and put things into place. The whole stars, the moons, our suns, everything, but also the fabric of our earth. He did all that in 6 days. Out of the chaos, it's often described as he created in 6 days. And then on the 7th day, almost like the culmination of the 6, but also the 7 representing the whole work of creation, we see that actually the number 7 is really important in biblical thinking. For the Jewish community, the word 7 symbolizes wholeness or completeness. This idea of God made all, and in the 6, but then in the 7 we celebrate the entirety of it all, the wholeness, the completeness. And while we're living in the midst of life now, in the non-completeness, in the non-wholeness, God's himself stopping to celebrate, to savor, to say that's what I did, and this 7th day is a day of appreciation, then he encourages us to do that also. To stop and to say, even though we haven't quite seen the completion of all things, the wholeness of all things, even though it doesn't feel whole, complete for us right now, we stop and we celebrate. We stop and we thank him that he is at work in it all. So that's the first reason why we should Sabbath. The second reason why we should Sabbath is because so often we get really focused on our own work and our own actions, and if I do this and I'll do that, then I can sort this out for myself. And yet God stopped and encourages us to stop so that we can recognize that we aren't fully in control. We want to be often, don't we? But we aren't in control of everything that is happening around the world. We aren't in control of this virus. And certainly I want to say that I don't believe God has made this virus to kind of punish people. I know some Christians are saying that, but I don't agree with that. But in the midst of this lockdown, God is wanting us to know that we can trust him. That while he might work on 6 days, on the 7th day, he wants us to stop. He wants us to press stop on all that we're doing and know that he is God. Know that he is in charge. Know that he is the author and perfecter of our faith. That he wants to tell us that if we're weary, if we're burdened, he wants to give us rest. So I wanted to say those things about why we should Sabbath. For those of you who are working, some of us feel, don't I? We feel sometimes like working is a bit like being a slave. Being a slave to our workplace. For some of us, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like a calling. It feels like a vocation. It feels like it's something that gives us life. And yet still we choose to put ourselves into that. And so when we are choosing to acknowledge that God created and then he is somehow figuring out the completeness of it all, and we should stop on that seventh day. And like how we should stop from our rest, then actually we should, even if we were enjoying it, even if we enjoy our work, and you might not feel the word slavery, you might not like that word slavery, but it is like somehow that we put ourselves under the workload of this thing that we enjoy or not enjoy. And he said, and God says, stop from even the stuff that you were enjoying. Stop, because God is wanting to liberate us, all of humanity, and that's why we should stop. Liberate us so that we can be liberated from that work and be in the garden with God. Genesis 2. In the garden with God. So that's why we should stop. Stop to celebrate God's culmination of all that he's doing, and stop to celebrate that he's liberating us from the need to work, the need to provide for ourselves, that he is with us. And I'm sure you'd agree that the biblical principle of stopping for a complete day is a brilliant principle. It's a great idea, isn't it, to be able to stop for a whole day. And yet I know so many of us find it difficult. It's inconvenient, isn't it, really, to stop? It's counterintuitive. If I kept on working, I could get more done. If I just worked this extra day, then I could get ahead of myself rather than fall behind. And certainly a lot of our employers, expect sometimes now so much that people are expected to work 7 days. And yet the Lord is encouraging us, would we stop? And I want to encourage you to consider stopping. And for the Jewish community, as they prepared for their weekly Shabbat, their weekly Sabbath, which began Friday evening, sundown Friday evening till Saturday sundown, there would often be that rush on that sixth day. Certainly the rush in the last few hours. I was listening to the podcast that Bible Projects were talking about, living in Jerusalem, and I can't wait to go there. When I get there next year now, is when I'm planning to go, not this year. Sabbatical cancelled, postponed till next year. And as I said, in Jerusalem, there would be all these markets, and everyone would be rushing about in the last hour or so leading up to sundown. People would ring bells to say, sundown's coming, you need to stop and get back to your homes. There's an urgency to get ready so that you can then stop. And I don't know about you, but it has felt a bit like that recently. For those of you who really want to get your teeth into some of that Jewish significance of the number 7, here's a couple of bits. I shan't dwell on them, but just to emphasize the point of how important number 7 is, we have this idea of 7 days, and then it ends with this Shabbat, this Sabbath. But within the year for the Jewish community, there would be 7 festivals. 7 festivals that they would celebrate, and at the end of every festival, there would be a Sabbath, a stopping and a celebrating the end of that festival. Every 7 years, they would be encouraged, certainly in ancient times, to let the fields go fallow, to stop farming. It was a farming community, wasn't it? To let the fields go fallow, to stop farming, to stop working, so that they don't get greedy, but also to give the earth a chance to heal, to give creation a chance to breathe. And there would be that. So 7 days, 7 festivals in 1 year, 7 years, and then 7 times 7 years, for the maths scholars out there, 49. There would be a working in that kind of pattern, and then on the next year, the 50th year, we would have the year of Jubilee. that actually this would be the year where all debts are cleared, that all land is returned, that all slaves are made free. And this was often called the year of the Lord's favour. Does that sound familiar? The year of the Lord's favour. Jesus preached on the Sabbath. In Luke 4 you find this, from Isaiah, where he quotes and says that this is the year of the Lord's favour. And he's speaking about himself. I am the year of the Lord's favour. And also in Matthew 12, we see that Jesus calls himself the Lord of the Sabbath. So why am I telling you all that? Well, I think it helps us with what we're facing today, because in our present day situation, it is like this enforced Sabbath. I've referred to it in a different video. But we've not chosen this, have we? We've not chosen to be in this lockdown, and I don't believe God has chosen it for us either. But in the midst of it, there is an opportunity to fully and completely stop. Maybe it's a little bit like the 7 years where we let the earth go to allow it to heal. Maybe it's a bit like that. But whatever it is, I really sense God saying that this is the time to stop. This is an opportunity for us to stop. And these last few weeks, certainly for those of us who've been preparing for lockdown, it's been like the rush of those last few hours on that 6th day. Getting everything ready. Certainly for us as a church, we've been trying to get everything ready to care for everyone, to be able to get systems in place, to be able to know how to look after people. And it's like that rush to get ready for the lockdown. But now we're in the lockdown. What is it like for you? What is it like on this weekend, this Sunday? How are you adjusting to the lockdown? And are you giving yourself the opportunity to stop? And folks, we have to make that choice for ourselves. I can't just tell you to stop and then something changes. You have to choose to stop. Will you stop? Will we allow ourselves to stop? Will we embrace the concept of stopping? Stopping, of ceasing all activity. Would we embrace the idea of a Sabbath? A pause, a stop to acknowledge God is in control, to acknowledge that God is doing something far bigger than we can comprehend or understand. That it isn't about just what we can do through our effort, that we stop and say, God, you are God, and we need you. Maybe your response to that question is, yeah, Matt, but I struggle with it. Matt, I struggle to stop. I struggle to cease. I'm someone who likes activity and jobs to do. And maybe others of you are saying, no, Matt, I feel really out of control. I feel so out of control in this lockdown and I can't cope. It's not good. It's not good for my mental health. It's not good for my well-being. I don't know how to homeschool my kids. I don't know how to get supplies. I feel like if I can't provide for myself or care for myself, then I might fall into some sort of abyss or feel overwhelmed or powerless. Many of people have felt that this week. You're not alone if you've felt that in these last few weeks. Certainly for us as a family, we've each had moments. We've each had moments where we felt like we're not coping, where like our mental health isn't great. I had one early on. Laura, something came next. Leah's had one since then, and only just recently, this last week. Thinking about all the schoolwork and the quantity just being sent by all the school. We each respond in different ways, and we all need each other. We need compassion. We need to be able to be vulnerable with one another, to say how it is that we feel. We need to be kind to one another. We need to pray. We need to really pray for one another. Pray that people would encounter God and know that God is in control in the midst of it all. To remind each other that we are God's beloveds and that He is with us and He wants to take care of us. So what I want to do is I want to go to breakout rooms if I can. Just going to pause this recording. We're going to go to breakout rooms, and I want to ask a question to you when you go to the breakout rooms. I'll remember to unmute you, don't worry. I want to ask you to think of this and chat together about your struggles with this enforced shutdown, this lockdown, this enforced Sabbath. How have you been coping? How have you been coping with the idea of stopping? Well, does that challenge something for you? Do you feel out of control? Talk together and then do that for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and a few of you can share responses. And then actually I want to then encourage people then, if people want prayer ministry, we're going to do a second breakout room in a bit, or breakout rooms, where a few of you, I need some volunteers, a few of you can pray for those who may be struggling with particular things. And we'll come to that in a bit later. So, yeah, let me unmute you all. Add a few more thoughts just before I hand over to Heidi to lead us in a prayer that we can all pray together. I didn't get done as much as I wanted to this morning, so next week I'll share a little bit more about rest. So far this morning we've looked at the idea of stopping, and I thought it was really important that we had opportunity to pray for people, to minister to one another, because it is so hard within our culture to stop. And folks, we need to learn this. We need to learn how to stop. I need to learn how to stop, because we can't get to rest until we stop. Did you hear me? We can't get to the idea of encountering God in the rest until we stop. I'll tell you just a really short story, and I might mention it again next time. I went out for a run. I've been going out for runs again during this lockdown as part of my exercise, and I was running around on the golf course, and I was saying, Lord, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening with this or that, X, Y, or Z. And I was waiting for him to reply, and I was running up this fairway, and the Lord said, stop, just stop. And I was like, no, I can't stop, God. I'm running up this fairway because I want to get a good time on my good lap time. And the Lord said, no, you just need to stop. Just stop right now. Just stop. And I was really cross. I was like, I'll just stop when I get to the brow of the hill, the Lord. And he said, no, stop right now. And I stopped right now. And he spoke to me, and he shared how much he loved me. And he spoke to me about something he wanted me to change, something he wanted me to adjust in my own life. And sometimes, folks, God is waiting for us to stop before he speaks to us. Sometimes God is wanting us to put aside all else so that we can then enter a place of rest so that he can be with us. And I have a real sense that Lord wants to use this opportunity with us, that the Lord wants us to stop from all things, to stop and acknowledge that he is God, so that then we can turn to him and say, Lord, you are God, and I am here with you. And he goes, good. Let's talk about some things. Good. Here's a moment where we can look at some of the intricacies of your life. Good. Let me show you how my yoke is light, how my yoke is easy. Good. I'm glad you've stopped. Now let's have some time of feasting or celebrating, or some time of literally just sleeping, or literally taking care of us, or changing your perspective about the way things look. The Lord wants to take this time to encourage you and to me these coming days and weeks to say, Lord, I am willing to stop. Maybe for some moments, maybe in some moments each day, maybe one day a week, but to say, Lord, I'm going to stop and acknowledge that you are God, and that what you have for me is light. What you have for me is goodness. What you have for me is wholeness and completeness. And as we Shabbat, as we stop, so we can move into that place of rest. So I'll say more about that next week, but I'll encourage you this week to take some time to stop. And that's why I spent quite a lot of our time this morning looking at this idea of stopping, because it's so foreign to us, so that you can then enter into rest.